Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Art of Online Marketing live show. My name is Denise Allison, and I help entrepreneurs grow with social media and live video. So today we have a guest on the show. It's Corinne Boudreau of Legal Essentials, and she's going to be sharing with us everything we need to know about doing business online as a Canadian business owner. So before we get started, I do want to remind everyone that the Social Media Business Awards nominations are still open. They're open until the 29th, which is Thursday. So if you know of a small business or any size business really doing cool things on social media, you can head over there and nominate them. All right, and then also I'm going to mention that this is too low, and I guess he's joining us for today's episode. All right, so let's bring out our guest. So Corinne is a small business lawyer in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and she's been giving practical legal advice to big business owners and professionals since 2002. And her hobbies include playing hockey and guitar and driving her kids around. Welcome, Corinne.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Denise.
Thank you for being here. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what your business, Legal Essentials, does?
Well, it's really an online community for women business owners. What I found from practicing law for what's seeming like many years now is that I was often waiting in my office for people to show up when they had a problem. And it's very much like I sort of use the analogy to health. Sometimes you don't think about your health until something bad happens, unless you're not feeling well. And I really wanted to help small business owners be more proactive, to learn about legal issues in their business and to hopefully address some of them before they got to a stage where they, got a nasty letter from Canada Revenue Agency, or somebody was suing them, or they couldn't collect on one of their, contracts. So I really wanted to get ahead of the game. So that's why I started on, Legal Essentials. Where the course, the idea for this teaching came from, I have to give a shout out to Nora Perry, who's a business advisor at the Center for Women in Business. In Nova Scotia, we're very lucky to have a program called Workplace Education. I think you've participated in that. So they have funding that comes through the provincial government, and it can go to business associations. So something like the Center for Women in Business, or it could be the Sackville Business Association, or some of the CBDCs, and they actually put on programming.
Commerce that takes advantage of that.
That's right, yeah. So they get money, and then they can put on programming that helps their business owners, grow their businesses. So Nora from the Center for Women in Business said, could you put together a course on legal things? And so I called it Legal Essentials, and that became an in-person course. And I've taught that 5 times to different business associations. And what I realized, as we all realize, is that Canada's a big country. Nova Scotia is a big province. I was getting requests to teach it, everywhere from Yarmouth to Sydney. And so I really wanted to put it online. So that's kind of where the online community came from.
All right. So you're currently developing that course, or is it ready to go?
It is so close. It is so close to being ready. Yeah, I'm putting the final touches on the big course. I've got a couple of things available online right now. One of the courses is a smaller slice, which is called Website Legal Essentials. And then I also started, the more I got online, the more I started having conversations with people online. So I've also got a couple of contracts available, which are things that people ask me for. So one of them is an online course agreement. Someone said, do you have one of those? And I said, I do. And I've also more recently got a request from somebody who's a coach who wanted a coaching agreement. So that is also available online now. But the big course, the sort of A to Z, all the things that you need to know for running an online business, that is going to be out in early January. So I'm just putting the finishing touches on that.
Got it. And what are some of the topics and the themes that you're going to cover in that course?
There are 6 modules. The first one is essential contracts. So to me, contracts are really the basis for a lot of what business owners do. So that first module talks about all of the contracts that you should have in your business. So your client contract, your employees and contractor agreements, So those are all the hiring things. Non-disclosure agreements. So if you're dealing with a student or getting someone to work on a project or a partner and you have confidential information, you can get them to sign a non-disclosure. Commercial leases. So those are kind of the big contracts. The next one is about legal structures. So what structure should your business have? Maybe it's not the same when you start as when you grow. The next, there's one on copyright and one on trademark. So those kind of deal with the intellectual property aspects of growing a business. There's one, the website legal essentials is another, that's the 5th module. And the last one is really specifically on online, essentials for online businesses. So the Canadian rules around anti-spam, social media policies, things you should think about around content creation, testimonials, using affiliates, and those kind of contests. And those are the other things. So all of those things in the Canadian context.
Okay. So I find that interesting because I like you, have seen people putting out contracts and putting out legal information, but it's all geared towards American businesses. So, I mean, what inspired you? I mean, I know you shared a little bit of your story, but what really inspired you to help do this for your fellow Canadian business owners?
Well, I think the Canadian legal industry is behind. So is behind other countries in terms of innovation. And this may not be a shock to you because we're probably also, my understanding is we're also behind in doing business online and maybe even in social media. I'm not sure, but definitely the legal industry in Canada is behind in terms of innovation. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was on a Canadian Bar Association innovation panel. And I joked at the time that to be innovative as a lawyer was a very low bar to jump over. So I've always been involved. When I started my own practice 6 years ago, I was trying to do things differently. But again, this is kind of the evolution of that. So I did come across online a number of US lawyers who were providing tools and templates online. I think Rachel Rogers was the first one that I found. She had a product called Small Business Bodyguard. And I knew some Canadians who had purchased that. And some of them had shared some of the content of it with me to kind of say, does this work in Canada? And some, it's kind of one of these things, some parts are fine and other parts were completely different. So it's really tricky for someone purchasing a US product to know which parts fit and which parts are very different in Canada. So that's like, okay, if Rachel Rogers and Lisa Fraley and Bobby Klink and all these US lawyers are doing it, and I know that Canadians are purchasing them, wow, I feel like I need to do this too.
Yeah.
So it was two things. Part of it was me wanting to be innovative and get people to do things again before there's a problem. And part of it was seeing people and getting to know some of these lawyers who are doing it online and seeing their stuff and being like, oh, actually, we don't have S Corps or LLCs in Canada. So you might not want to try to form one of those.
Yeah. Right. Well, that brings me to another point. One of the big topics this year has been the GDPR, which is, of course, a European standard. So tell us a little bit how this impacts Canadian businesses.
Right. So as you said, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, it's a law of the European Commission, which deals with the European Union. So it kind of it regulates information, personal information, that's our term in Canada, but all of that information about an identifiable individual. It regulates it for people in Europe, and then there's kind of the non-Europeans. So we fall, Canada and the US falls into the non-European people, but we still have to think about it because what it says is for any non-European businesses, if you're targeting people in the European Union, then you have to comply with GDPR as well. So that's a little bit unusual. Usually, or often, you just have to worry about your domestic laws wherever you are. But obviously with the internet, and I mean, people could come along and buy your course, I'm sure, from anywhere in the world. But as an online marketer, you can decide whether you're going to restrict your things to certain countries, or if you're just going to say, hey, anybody anywhere in the world, you can come and buy my stuff. So GDPR applies to anyone who is targeting EU people. And EU people could be, it could be me while I'm sitting in a cafe in Paris on my computer, or it could be obviously a resident of the EU. So then you have to think about what it really does is sets a higher bar for how you collect, how you use, how you store, and how you protect all of that kind of personal information. So some of the big implications, if you're targeting people in the EU, so again, if I'm saying, hey, come buy my product online, and I'm actually running Facebook ads in the EU or doing other things to target people in the EU, then I have to make sure I'm complying with the GDPR standards. One of the big things is that you need explicit consent in order to sign people up for something like an email list. So you can't just say, here's my freebie, and by downloading their freebie, you automatically add them to your email list. You have to get them to explicitly say, okay, I want the freebie, but I also want to subscribe to your email list. So it requires explicit consent, where in Canada or in the US, at least right now, we don't require explicit consent for the different pieces of that whole transaction.
Got it. So if so my business, for example, deals generally with North American residents, and I don't target people in the EU. I mean, they might just show up and want to buy from me or work with me. So in that case, do I need to be following those rules, or because I'm not targeting them, can I just follow the Canadian anti-spam and those other regulations that we have here?
Yeah. I think people are taking two different approaches right now. One is if they can segment their list on their, and this is getting a little technical here, but if you can segment your list in your email service provider so that you know who's coming from where, then you can just show the GDPR compliant it's usually a pop-up box or a checkbox or something. You could just show it to those people and then not worry about the rest of the people. So if your email service provider can say, okay, Corinne is coming from Canada, then you don't need to worry about that. Or you could just say, this is not appropriate for people in the EU. Like, my product is really for Canadians, so I think the risk is pretty low, having said this is for Canadian business owners, that I'll get anyone in the EU signing up for my email list or buying my products. But we don't know. It's early days. The laws just came in. So some people you could say, so one thing is segment your list. Some people, the other approach is really, I'm going to apply GDPR to everybody. And I think if you're somebody like Amy Porterfield or Marie Forleo or, I don't know who, if you really are global, you might want to just apply the GDPR standards to everybody and be a little bit safe. I think you're more likely to be caught in this if you are a big player rather than somebody who's small. I guess when I said there's two different approaches, there's probably three. The third is just put some GDPR language in your privacy policy and just say, if you happen to be from the GDPR, I will follow these standards. But it's very low risk that I'm going to catch anyone from the GDPR just because I'm not targeting them. So I think you can either apply to everyone, segment your list, or just put some language in your privacy policy, which would apply to them if, in fact, anyone comes to you from the GDPR. You have to assess, like anything else in a small business, you have to assess your level of risk based on your business. So.
All right. So my next question is, of course, on the show we talk about social media a lot. So I was wondering, what are some potential risks for people who are putting a lot of content out there on social media?
Right. I think the first risk is one that is super practical, but I think it's really important to talk about. It's that if you are the business owner, you need to make sure that you own and that you actually control your social media accounts. Because sometimes people hire someone, a social media manager or a summer student, or I don't even know who, to manage their social media. And they don't actually have access to the accounts. They don't own the admin password. And then they find out when they find out some point later. And this often came to me as a business lawyer because someone would be going to sell the business. And they'd be like, I'd say, okay, so that's great. We're going to be transferring, your Facebook, your Twitter, your whatever. And they'd be like, actually, we can't access the Facebook business page right now because we lost control of the password. So that's just a risk of ownership, right? And that's if social media is an important part of your business and you've put a lot of effort and time and money into building that, then man, as the business owner, I'm not saying you have to be in there doing all the posts yourself, but make sure that you still control it. So that I would just say that's risk number one that I see.
I run into that a lot as well. In a few cases, sometimes people just email me and they're like, I have a social media problem. And it's something like that. They had a former employee or a student or an intern or somebody set up their accounts and they don't have access to it. Or I'll have clients who want me to work with them and it's the same issue where they can't get into the account and they need to either get it taken down and start a new one, or I don't know, but that seems to happen.
And sometimes the same thing happens with domains. So I'd say the first thing is make sure that you own it and control it, because if you don't, that's just a risk that's floating around out there, especially if you go to sell it or even franchise or do something else. That you have to make sure you have control of that. The next thing is just, I guess it's really reputation management. And that's really where a social media policy or guidelines or something like that comes out. Because obviously if I'm hiring someone to do my social media, or if I have employees who are doing it, or even maybe if I'm doing it myself, it's much easier than it used to be. People would sit down before and, I don't know, craft press releases, and it would probably go through a couple of different sets of eyes and hands before people actually sent something out into the world on behalf of the company. But now it's very easy to, retweet something or put a comment on somebody's Instagram post or Facebook post or whatever. So I think you have to set some standards, especially once you start hiring employees or hiring contractors to help you with this, is to set some standards, because I think we've all heard of stories of, the employee saying something which, damages the reputation. So part of it, I think it's still somewhat remote that someone would sue your company based on what you've said in social media, but that's another thing that you definitely have to be careful of, especially if it's something that's, something that's racist or homophobic, or I don't know, there's all kinds of different things that you definitely want to make sure that your employees are not using your company's social media to do things that could harm someone else. Sometimes it's as simple as, saying something bad about another company, perhaps a competitor, on social media. So there are some exceptions around, truth is always a defense to slander or defamation, but it does have to be factual. There's some things around opinion. If you're a member of the media, there's some exceptions there. But it's good to have all of this stuff in a policy of some sort to say, here's our values, and here's what we're not going to do, and here's what we are going to do in social media, just so it doesn't become a free-for-all for immediate reactions, which are not always well thought out, I guess I would say.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought there might be a number 3. All right. What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they are either putting a lot of their marketing materials online or running an online business? What are some things that you see commonly?
Well, I think one of the ways that people can really protect themselves is to use disclaimers. So I guess the mistake would be not really giving any thought about that. So I just recently got a question from somebody who said, I basically, I want to be able to not so much guarantee results, but I want to be able to show someone, here's all of the stuff that I do, and here's someone's results. I have a podcast, and the last podcast I did was with Janet McDonald, whose business is helping kids get scholarships.
Okay.
So she wants to be able to say, I'm going to take you through this process and obviously increase your chances of getting a scholarship. But she doesn't want to be seen to guarantee someone that they're going to get a scholarship. So there's always that balance of saying, I'm going to help you do something, but I don't want to guarantee the result. So you can basically use disclaimers either in your contracts on paper or online to say, here's what I'm going to do, here's what you're responsible for, but I'm not guaranteeing any particular result. Because I think, again, online, people sometimes jump to a conclusion and might start to rant about the fact that their child went through this program of yours, or their business went through this program of yours and didn't get the results. And it could be very well be because they didn't follow the program, or it could be who knows what. But you don't want to be legally responsible for that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the mistakes. I think one of the other mistakes is just not having written contracts. And I know some of this stuff is a pain to set up in the beginning, but I think the value of a written contract, there's a couple of different values to it. One is it makes you feel organized. So if you have a client contract, for instance, and every time you sign on a new client, you've got to go through the process. I think it shows them that you're organized and that you've got a process. It also helps you to feel like, I've got this, I've got all the procedures in place. But then you can also put all those good clauses in there to protect you and to make it very clear about what their responsibilities are, what yours are, what the scope of the services are, or the product. Again, how are they going to pay? When are they going to pay? If they don't pay on time, are there going to be, interest and penalties? If they want to cancel it, how soon do they have to cancel it? Is there any kind of non-refundable deposit? All that kind of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have in a conversation. It's just, that would be a weird conversation to go through all those points.
Yep. Okay.
But it's much easier to send someone a contract that's already done that. I sort of say it's pre-thinking. I mean, we've already thought about all the things that could go wrong, and they're all here on this nice couple of pieces of paper. And having the discussion up front with somebody about all of these policies is much more comfortable than having the discussion afterwards.
Got it.
Yeah. My son's basketball team has been suffering from some would say bad refereeing this year. But, it's a bit of an opinion. But one of the guys in their basketball association said, just at the beginning of every game, you should get the name of the referee and get the name of the scorer at the beginning of the game, right? Because at that point, it's all good. The game hasn't started yet. It's non-confrontational. Versus after you've been screaming at each other, then you ask the guy, the person, the name, the referee, their name. That's a much more confrontational exchange. So I'd almost say it's the same with contracts. At the beginning, I'm like, hey, Denise, I want to hire you. You send me a contract. We talk about it all. It's all good. We're all happy. We're on the same page. That's the time to have those discussions. And maybe the discussion is, oh, hang on a second. I need to give you 30 days notice to cancel this. Okay, well, then I put that in my mind that if I'm ever going to cancel it, then I need to give you that notice. Rather than me getting angry 6 months later and wanting to cancel it, and you being like, oh, look, I told you that you had to. So it's just better to have some of those conversations up front.
Exactly. I agree. All right. What is there anything else that we need to know from a legal standpoint?
Oh, man.
I'm sure there's lots of things, but for today, just leave us with one thought.
Yeah. My one thought is that I don't think legal issues have to be scary.
Mhm.
I try not to be a scary lawyer, and I try to make legal advice and legal information very practical. I'm not really sure where this has come from, but I think a lot of people are somewhat hesitant about even wanting to learn about legal issues. They just think, oh my God, I have to go hire a lawyer. I can't possibly know about legal stuff because I haven't gone to law school. Or I took law in high school, but it was taught by my math teacher, and I'm not really sure. We mostly talked about criminal law. I guess I just want to bring the message that law can be accessible. I'm meant to be the guide. I'm definitely the guide to help you through some of this. But I actually think that business owners are smart, they're savvy, they're practical, and a lot of this stuff they can actually navigate themselves. Not to say that there aren't times that you're going to have to go hire a lawyer. There are, and I'm not trying to say that you're never going to have to go hire a lawyer. But I think there's a lot that business owners can do, and themselves with some guidance, and especially Canadian guidance rather than guidance from Australia or the US or the UK. So those are my final thoughts.
All right, makes sense. All right, thank you so much for being on the show today. If our viewers want to learn more about you or about the law, where can they go to learn more?
Sure. I have a website, onlinelegalessentials.ca, and so you can go there. I do have some free guides that you can download for free, and that'll also get you onto my email list, and I send out weekly emails with tips and tools. I also have a Facebook page. Right now, Instagram is my favorite social platform. I'm finding a lot of people there. So I'm at Lawyer Corinne on Instagram. I was teaching volunteering at Junior Achievement, and we were talking about social media profiles, and I was showing the grade 9 class my Instagram, trying to get them to give me some tips.
Yeah.
They definitely love Instagram, but I'm getting more into it. So that's where people can find me. I'd also just put a plug in for my podcast. This is just a new thing, Women Doing Cool Stuff. So if anybody knows any women in Canada who are doing cool stuff, either their businesses, their jobs, or their volunteer work, you can find information on the podcast. I'm always looking for guests for that too. So they can reach me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching today. And we'll be back. I'll be back next week for another episode of the Art of Online Marketing live show. All right, everyone, have a great week.
Thanks, Denise.